there's a natural limiting of understanding there, because like unless you're there, you won't know that much.
Many people may be a little bit just afraid by the way how those large language models evolve.
It almost seems like generative AI can do anything. So, now it's almost a question of what are the actual limitations of this technology.
This is a really good question. I would like just to bring maybe a little bit different perspective to that. One of the things about like machine learning and generative AI, which personally concerns me a little bit, is explainability. It is sort of like a black box. Because as humans, we tend to like people whom we can understand, who can explain their ideas quite clearly, even very difficult and complex ideas, we like to be explained clearly and shortly so that we can understand. Before large models, a lot of machine learning was actually a black box. Now there are techniques like tree of thoughts, like step-by-step explanation of each step. Many people actually use ChatGPT and ask it to break down the problem and approach it step by step. I think this is a great progress which we have towards better adoption of deep learning like large language models. But we're still not quite there, I think. And I think that's maybe a major limitation to adoption.
Yeah, the ability for people to actually start understanding what's going on internally.
Or the system to explain how it works, how it goes from like 0 to 1, how it goes from just the question to an answer.
I think sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, lots of people, they just want to see like step-by-step reasoning.
Right. So I think one question comes to mind is like, how did we create something we don't, I don't to be cheesy, but how do we create something we don't understand? But how do we get to the point where we're making something like this? Like, because, it's understandable if you have something in nature that we use that we don't understand. But to have a whole, I would say a whole system that we put the pieces in, we tweak it a little bit, it gives us results, and then we actually don't understand how it works. I think for most people who are outside the industry, how to get to that point sounds a bit, I guess, as strange as dystopian. So it's like maybe not necessarily dystopian, but definitely, there's a scene in a movie somewhere like, how did you do this? Or why did you keep going?
Yeah, this is really a good question. And I think really maybe the incentives need to change a little bit. That's just my idea. So far the incentive was like, who beats the bar test for lawyers, right? Or who passed a certain test, that was the way how different systems were competing against each other. I guess this helps to achieve better answers, but again, it doesn't give the whole step-by-step solution. I think if we were to change those benchmarks, then the scientific community could really advance with this step-by-step reasoning. That's on the scientific part, though. Other parts, which I think, which I feel is underdeveloped, is sort of some vulnerability checks. So, like for software, the software industry was developing for a long time, and there are a lot of techniques and procedures which are done to basically make sure that the software is harmless. I wish we could have something similar to large language models as well. So I just believe if we change a little bit incentives and adopt best software engineering practices, it can help to increase trust into those new piece of the technology called large language models. Although, to be honest, I strongly believe that almost all software stack will have to be redone completely for these new applications. It's just software, 3.0.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. So do you think that it's possible that this kind of with this similar, and not necessarily, with an incentive structure that allows something to have a result without a lack of understanding, that it would have happened in a different kind of industry? Or is this very unique to software? In a way, I guess not, right? Because we do have like food industries, or like even it kind of all this kind of stuff kind of does happen in like in the drugs industry, or where they make something and then they find out the famous example is D something, where it was like fertilizer. They found out it made frogs have 3 legs, the classic example of a problem. Yeah, so I guess that kind of stuff is happening in software. So we do it in smaller scales, or I guess it's happening in this kind of, it happens in every field, but this one is particularly concerning.
Yeah, and I also believe that many people may be a little bit just afraid by the way how those large language models evolve. Definitely the speed of innovation is very high, and I'm personally very happy to be part of these movements. GPT-3, which was published back 2020, was already a very good step forward, and it seemed to be quite useful for vertical applications, like for content marketing, for certain writing. But I guess nobody expected that in 2022 we will have something mind-blowing like ChatGPT, because it really felt like a general purpose system.
Do you think there are tools that people are trying to solve this problem of a sort of inspection, where we can actually understand these models a little bit better? And also, even is it possible, because a lot of these systems are being exposed through an API, they're basically mainframe behavior, or the sort of the old way computers are getting. It's almost everything is resetting, right? Essentially, in the way we interact with software, we have mainframes again. So basically, every new abstraction sort of requires a centralized access system. So, what is the? Well, I guess in this case, it's unique because now these centralized access systems are not hidden in universities. Everybody has access to them. So this presents an interesting problem that the only people who will have the ability to properly inspect it are at the mainframes, but everyone is still using it. So that there's a natural limiting of understanding there, because like unless you're there, you won't know that much. You still want to inspect, but you're using it in your system.
This is really a good question. And I think this is something which captures minds of the best people in the world. Like, we can see that there are hearings in Congress, all the top CEOs are invited, and they basically discuss if there should be regulation or not, and at which level the regulation is exposed. Is it government, or like AWS, GCP, and other major cloud providers should just make sure that whatever they serve is harmless, right? So I think that's really an important debate, and I think a very important angle to look at is the competition. I think it's difficult for me to say because it's maybe not public yet, but I guess other countries have systems which have like GPT 3.5 capabilities. Maybe not GPT-4 capabilities, but GPT 3.5, which is ChatGPT, which is already very, very good. We also can see that I think in Middle East, there are a few outstanding colleges which produce kind of state-of-the-art open source projects like Falcon. Probably if we exclude Meta's work on Llama, that Falcon is probably the best. It's now the runner-up in that space. So I believe that there is a lot of competition going on. So, and as we know, regulation tends to slow down the innovation. And I think that's a huge debate right now.
Fair enough. So I hopefully that competition gives the market opportunities to rapidly iterate in the same way they did with AI systems themselves, ways for us to actually inspect them and get a better understanding of them. And hopefully the race happens in a different area. It gives us a little bit more power on how these things work. So hopefully that does happen. What I do know is also before. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just was thinking about that a little, and I think there are other ways how companies can encourage can encourage community to find bugs and maybe become more open. Like for many companies, they actually have bounties. Like when you find a bug or something, you report it, and companies pay very generously from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've seen this happening in software worlds, maybe not that much in LLM worlds. So
that happened at Netflix for their recommendation algorithm. It was $1 million prize. I remember that was like 10 years ago.
I think there are certain ways how corporates can encourage community to find those flaws, really. I think unfortunately it's not happening. We're not seeing these efforts yet, I believe, from those large companies which develop large language models. But I just hope that as a technical community, as a society, will just take the best practices which we developed in software worlds, which kind of instill trust in tech, and use them for large language models.
And it matches your previous statement about incentives. It's really about incentivizing people in a particular direction. So we got here from incentives, essentially, where we don't incentivize, we incentivize basically results without necessarily any of the responsibility you talked about or understanding of the mechanism you're leveraging. So if we can take that sort of idea or philosophy of incentives and apply to, okay, here's what we do need to have it right now. Hopefully, it seems like people respond very well to incentives. So hopefully they actually do that. And I think that's a fair way to make these things happen. Right. So we'll talk a little bit. We talked a little bit about generative AI and the status of it. And I know you worked at Snapchat for quite a while, and as the director, it was interesting how using generative AI or leveraging generative AI in that sort of business model in that space. So it'd be interesting to hear some of the challenges and maybe successes that you came across while you were sort of pushing the technology in that area.
First of all, I believe I have seen that there are many people who actually can have deep and personal conversations with a chatbot. I think we see this across the industry. I think this is not like Snap specific insights. One area is one area like which gets quite popular is I would say like virtual relationships. There was an app called Replica, very famous for that. It seems like this use case is quite popular for character AI, and I believe for companies like Snap, that's my personal opinion, there are many opportunities to actually introduce chatbot as a maybe study assistant or maybe a mental health assistant. Those are two areas where I believe large companies like Snapchat can make a lot of impacts on the society. Although, like on the technical standpoint, I believe there are a lot of problems called hallucinations, And also, even if you just follow OpenAI website, they update the model almost every week. At the bottom of the website, they say, this is the model like from 25th of September. And you can see they constantly update it. So I guess just making something which is sort of stable and doesn't hallucinate much is a very difficult problem. I think Snap did a very good job at that, and I think many people may not fully maybe appreciate it, but just really making system reliable for especially for younger demographics is a very tough challenge.
Right. What and I guess what do you see the value of the reliability to be per se? And that's an like sort of the angle you came at that is interesting. Is it that how do I put this? I guess it's the consistency of the result is where you're going with the reliability. The result has to be consistent. But in a way, almost. But is that does that take away from the authenticity? This is sort of almost a ridiculous statement, but does it take away from the authenticity of the conversation if it's reliable? Because if in a way, if the conversation is truly deep, then it is spontaneous, and therefore it's not reliable.
Yeah, I can understand. Also, as humans, I mean, a lot of people, they really like to maybe hear bold statements as well. Many bold statements may be partially true, right? And I just believe that there is a general maybe understanding of those chatbots. Many people still expect technology to be sort of right to the point. And I think like the supply and demand needs to meet somewhere. I guess humans need maybe to become less sensitive about those issues and maybe take some results from those chatbots with a grain of salt. Like that's not something which is 100% true. And I believe the systems like those chatbots still tend to be very agreeable, very, very agreeable. So they can agree even with the very wrong statements, and which lead to further and very serious hallucinations. So I guess we need to see supply and demand meeting.
That's a fair point. And and I would think the market has to be trained on that a little bit. That's something that the market has to understand understand what this is, and understand that this is a chatbot, and have an understanding that this is not real and treat it as such in the way they interact with it. This is just, I'm sort of blue oceaning with you now, but it'd be interesting to have the ability to tune the big 5 personality traits into a chatbot, whether it's this, because you talk about being disagreeable or not, being open or not, being conscientious or not. It'd be interesting if we could tweak those hyperparameters in, and then see what comes out in terms of a personality from these chatbots.
Exactly, and I think this is first of all, this is a very interesting space. Let's say you have a general good large language model like ChatGPT, and then you want to do on top of it, you want to do meta learning for each specific person based on their interactions. I think this is what kind of humans usually do, because the way how the same human with the same knowledge base, the same temper may interact with different people is just different, right? Many people talk to their parents very differently, they talk to their kids and so on, right? So I think we do not see this type of behavior, or we don't see that much progress in that space so far, I believe. And this is something which likely may stay a little bit like closed source, kind of behind the doors. Only large companies have an access, have that huge distribution. So only large companies have this type of the problem. And very likely that's gonna be like a recommendation system, right? Like everyone knows that Netflix recommendation system is something special, and TikTok, like ByteDance, became successful only maybe solely because of this genius recommendation system. And still pretty much nobody knows how exactly it works. There are not so many papers on like secret sauce. And we can see probably the same here with LLMs, that the secret sauce of personalization of the model for each specific user is going to stay within those companies. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. If the LLM mechanism is understood, the personalization mechanism will be the thing that will differentiate one company for another, because they will basically, the user interface of any website or any app is the value to add to the any customer. There's a reason why Apple is successful. So in the space of LLMs, the user interface is the ability to be more personable, and that's where the differentiator is going to be for any company working on building LLMs, if I understood what you were saying. And it's going to be proprietary.
Yeah. Just changing a few hyperparameters, as you mentioned, like just changing a few hyperparameters. We can start just from these 5 personality traits. We can just expand this to 10 or 20 and just modifying what suits the best for each user. I mean, that's where it can easily evolve.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. And then also, and that tuning is relative to the person's feedback, right? It'd be interesting that you can tweak a personality that way. Where, if a person has a tendency to misspell, you can have the LLM sort of encourage you not to do that relative to how well you receive information. You can do all kinds of things.
I spoke to somebody in like psychology space. I believe there is a technique for people called mirroring. So I guess it's very simple. For example, basically, people tend to like people who are similar to them. So if somebody has an accent or an immigrant, then they would appreciate a conversation with someone who doesn't put that much pressure on them, right? In terms of like complicated vocabulary. So I think we can see mirroring working in very different aspects of our lives, in very different aspects of our communication.
Absolutely. So so we've talked a lot about the sort of the space of LLMs and all that, and that's been sort of a great way to sort of move into sort of how these newer companies, smaller companies, can take advantage of that to provide value to the market. Because how do you see these smaller companies, how even are you seeing them take slices of these problems and combine them into something that their competitors cannot compete with, I suppose, or is valuable to the market in general?
Look, I'm blown away by the speed of adoption. It's really fascinating. Very often, it was very different. It was in a way that runner-ups tried to adopt the technology, and incumbents were operating quite slowly. It is not the case here. I mean, I can tell you that Microsoft obviously planned all this GPT-4 type of integration, DALL-E integration, back 1 year ago or even earlier. So they took it very seriously from the day number one. We can see that one of the earliest partners for OpenAI was Bain. And Bain is a very large company, right? And we saw that Google very quickly put Bard in front of people and also integrated it with their Google Drive, with Gmail, with the whole G Suite. I believe this is quite different from what we have seen in the past. Now actually startups, they can sell to large companies from the day number one, and I see this trend going in many different many early companies. Again, in all the previous hype cycles, I haven't seen anything like that. Usually, startups had to first sell to SMBs, then maybe go to like high scale growing startups like pre-IPO companies, earn their trust, and then proceed with enterprise. Even like looking at Snowflake, one of the best IPOs I guess we have ever had, one of the best companies revolutionizing the way how data warehouses work in the cloud. But I think they went pretty much through the same path as well. And again, now I see early startups, just a few people already working with the large companies, like especially in consulting and legal space. They already work with like companies like Bain, Ernst & Young, Pricewaterhouse, and so.
Yeah, PwC. Right. So the barrier to entry for a larger, well, I suppose the power of the technology is such that the barrier to entry has to be shattered. Maybe partially because of the, partially because of newness, partially because of expertise, right? That many people who can actually build functional systems that compete with something like ChatGPT, and that gives people who have the expertise quite the advantage in being able to build something in the market. So that's an interesting. And also, I would also say it's interesting that the speed of that. What do you feel like? I mean, the value is quite clear, but with some of the things that you've seen, where the security isn't there, and some of the things that it might be concerning isn't there, why do companies of that size feel comfortable to invest to that degree? What is unique about this? There's other things that are more obvious and less risky that the people were standoffish about, but this somehow everyone is okay with that.
I really like you ask this question. I believe I can contribute to that. So look, I think I want to maybe just share how I see psychology of large corporations, small corporations, and startups and so on. So large corporations, they are very much driven by the competition because they care a lot about the optics. If someone launched chatbot, then the board, the stakeholders very likely can expect their competitors to launch chatbot as well, right? So that creates a huge push, I guess, in consulting and legal space. Once Bain announces official partnership with OpenAI, it pushes everyone to just go and find their key partner, either Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, some other company. So I think privacy is definitely one of the issues, and I think very often the way how startups got differentiated is that they collected unique data for their use case and were able to iterate on top of it. I think here we need to separate two buckets of data. First is, I would say, like product analytics, and the second is like data sent to LLM. So let's split it. Still, all the startups, they can just iterate on the product analytics, make conversions better, onboarding better, and so on. Although on the security/privacy side, we definitely see a huge pushback from large companies to make sure that their data is never going to be used to train the next generation model. Let me try to explain. Let's say there is a new company which provides services to legal firms. Those companies usually want to maybe serve OpenAI, be like OpenAI wrapper in the beginning, then accumulate the data, then take open source model and fine-tune this model on this unique data that they've got. The only issue, and that's kind of the basic playbook, the most basic playbook I can ever imagine. The problem is that this basic playbook doesn't work well. Large companies doesn't want their data to be used to train a model which can be used by somebody else. If somebody uses their data, then they want to be the only company which will benefit from it. I think I've seen, and Snap, for example, takes privacy security very seriously. And I think this was a major requirement for a company like Snap and for many other large companies, especially in sensitive areas like insurance or legal. That's pretty much the requirements. And that's actually the problem for those B2B startups. Because if they serve as OpenAI wrapper right now, it may be very difficult to switch away from it. That's why having B2C product is much easier, because in B2C, people just sign up, agree with all the terms, they cannot negotiate, and they just use it. That's why OpenAI long-term gets a lot of benefits from actually having B2C products available publicly, because they can actually use these data to train all their models later on. And they cannot do this for their B2B clients. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to say, let me say this. It's a beast that very much feeds itself successfully by the very nature of its own model. It just becomes more powerful as as its roots spread throughout the market. And the B2C side, and then obviously B2B have to be private in the security, because they're saying. And it also makes sense that that's why they partner so soon and so quickly, and just because they just understand, they need to be early on the trend, because if they have other companies monopolize the intellectual property, they never will have access, because everybody else wants to keep like you said, these pseudo hyperparameters that are tuned to have high personal ability internally. There's no way they can take that, and so they need to partner very early to make sure that they have that or at least they play in the same game, or they have the same opportunity vector as the other organizations. So it's a very smart decision. It explains exactly why they're doing it so soon, and it's a complex decision, but it's very properly done. But it also means that the current B2B players are going to do really well, but then as the market continues, it's going to be harder. Basically like any other market, it's going to be harder and harder. The barrier to entry is going to go up and up and up and up. And I guess in this case, it's unique because it's going to go up very quickly. It's going to go very quickly.
Exactly. So B2C companies, they kind of have a shot to collect unique data, train maybe specialized model over time. Although for B2B companies, they may not just get any unique data due to contractual obligations with their corporate partners, corporate clients.
Is there any companies, or do you see anything interesting in this space? Because we talked about tooling, where they're specifically trying to, gather or trying to eat up the space of proper tooling for these models. Because I think that's where where the market can open up once it converges, where the market can open up again. If the better the tools are to, unpack how these things work. Are there any companies attacking that particular problem, not just making B2B and B2C products for people?
This is a really good question, and there is a lot about that. So first of all, there was a huge level of investments in ML ops space in the past, so that startups basically build tooling so that machine learning models can be built easily and can be served easily. And I think this whole movement maybe was a little bit, maybe didn't meet all the expectations from people. I think, again, with large companies, they don't have, they generally are very, very patient. And the only reason for them to move is when they see their customers demanding it, or their competitors doing that. So that may be always a reason for slow adoption. Another reason for slow adoption in that space is basically a lot of companies may try to build the tooling internally. And I think very often we really can see the pattern that some tooling is built in a product company, and then people leave the company and kind of build very similar tooling on the side. They know that it's working, easier to sell because they always can say that it's actually worked at scale. So these are two maybe reasons why this developer experience revolution may not happen. But I believe in the same time, I believe all the aspects like safety, as we mentioned, monitoring like on the usage side, observability on the technical side, like logging, cost controlling, like development tools like IDEs, everything can be reimagined for this new era. That's why I am quite bullish on tooling startups right now. I'm more bullish on that than the previous generation of MLOps companies.
Really? Have you seen anything interesting in the market so far? Any tools that have been made that are going in that you feel like going in the right direction? Are we too early on it?
It is. This is a really good question. I think it's a sort of. I think there is a huge point about like vector databases. And actually trying to use them to make responses factually correct and reduce hallucinations. I am really not sure, though, that those solutions are already used at wide scale right now.
Pinecone is trying their best, but...
Yeah, Pinecone... I know the guys from Chroma, they are the best. The competition in that space is quite fierce. Although again, I'm just not aware of specific examples when the tooling actually was used and kind of drove value in some large-scale project.
If we think of transformers as what they're named, transformers, they take an understanding of a space and turning into another understanding, or they take an abstract model and turn it into another abstract model. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what do you think? And you can think of that kind of. You can think of that almost like. A part of a brain, I suppose, right? This is a part of the brain that, maybe translates sound to understanding, or, translates sight to understanding, or translate any of these pieces of reality into the model that you have in your own head of the world. So, and if you were to speculate, what do you think is the next piece of the brain that's missing, right? Why is that transformation not enough?
Okay, that's an interesting point. So, I believe that first of all, like existing models, they are pre-trained in a purely statistical way. Basically, there is a huge corpus of text on the internet, and basically the way how those models are pre-trained is they try to basically generate sentences in a way that if a sentence is 6 words, one word is masked, kind of hidden, and neural network has to predict that word. That's kind of purely statistical mode. I think the next step is really I think people learn from kind of books, kind of knowledge sources, but also from interactions with each other a lot. I think we have, RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback is a first step in that direction. And I want here to maybe make a little bit wild hypothesis, but I think it's just worth to mention. So I think if you look at the past, computers, they became better than humans in chess, Go, and Dota, which is computer game. The way how computers achieve that is not that they analyzed all the human activity. It's not like they were playing with humans. No, they were playing with itself. And they learned it kind of almost from scratch. I'm not sure that kind of learning from scratch is applicable here for large language models. But we, as a society, we definitely didn't explore much what is going to happen if those LLMs, kind of agents, learn by interacting with each other. There is only early work in that direction, and I think a lot of progress can be driven by that. At least from my perspective, previous history of building successful kind of products or successful models tells us about that.
Right. If someone were, what do you think if someone were to start this endeavor trying to go into the space, what do you think were the main subjects they should pay attention to make it, to be able to make it or be able to make a contribution? Where do you think they should angle their focus? I would say surprisingly a bit more psychology than you would assume.
I think there is definitely a lot into like B2B adoption. I think there are certain privacy security concerns about just using ChatGPT in regulated industries. So those, sensitive areas, industries, they would require custom-made solution, and that's why I believe we see certain traction in legal tech with generative AI adoption. And there are many startups operating in legal tech space. I think there is really a lot. Again, there is a lot to the distribution, the way how the software is positioned and sold. There is a lot of psychology of buyers and the way how those solutions are getting presented to employees. I think in the entertainment space, a lot of people may be more vocal and just have better access to newspapers and PR. That's why we just have seen Hollywood strikes, which I guess came to the resolution. I think that may be just the beginning. Maybe entertainment industry is just historically it was quite fast. And also, I think people in that space, they may have certain levers to actually push studios and fight for their rights, right? And I think the same is likely happening in other industries as well. They're just more less publicly exposed. So that many leaders in those sensitive areas may have similar type of issues, and they have to deal with concerns from their workers that generative AI is going to replace them, so that they need to be very mindful about the purchasing decision, how they explain it to the team. In the same time, they have pressure from the stakeholders because we see that speed of adoption is quite high. So definitely there is a lot of psychology there, and really being able to properly explain the value from the technology.
If we go into the business side of things, what do you think would be the new, or maybe not necessarily new, but the changes in the architecture of an organization that will happen because of, I guess, AI models and generative AI model? I would assume that that the way organizations are structured, the way teams are structured, the technology is going to seep into every single person's way of being productive. So that would, either remove or add or require certain checks and balances and communication channels that were not probably predicted before. An example that happened over the last like 20, 30 years is this agile model that has been promoted, so much in the world of being productive and being responsive to market conditions, and that's sort of successfully sort of permeated almost any large organization. I'm going to assume that this generative AI is going to, somebody somewhere is going to give some acronym about a new way to think about how we organize teams. So what do you, before that happens, what do you think actually are the parameters that they will have to tweak to get that right?
This is a really good question.
It's tough. I'm not sure myself. Yeah, I have no idea. Myself, I have no idea.
I mean, parts of the I think we need to start breaking out like at the levels at which software is operating. Like B2B solution may either operate with kinds of publicly available information or privately available. Let's say publicly available information is marketing. So I guess we can see very different models like PLG, like product-led growth for marketing solutions. So that, and maybe within the companies, hopefully we will see more encouragement from leadership to just go and try new tools for areas where no internal materials are kind of shared, right? Marketing is one of those areas. Although when you think about enterprise search, or you think about developer productivity, those type of the systems, they still need to integrate to the core databases. And a lot of proprietary knowledge will get exposed to those systems. I think it still will require rigorous security approvals, and it will require likely C-level people to be involved. And those type of the solutions and corresponding decisions historically were not made very quickly. Because, I mean, in corporate, there are symmetrical risks that people do not necessarily want to take risks, right? And integrating some solution which exposes your proprietary information to this new solution is definitely a certain risk. And people in large companies, they try to mitigate risks through those security questionnaires, which contain over 100 questions and so forth. So I definitely believe we will still see security, compliance, privacy being
truly paramount. It'll become really, it'll start, the concern will elevate itself to a level that most people can see it.
Exactly. And I think we need to really understand that the risks so far have been no major data leak related to large language models, right? Just no. And there is already a lot of concerns about it. So I believe that probably in security space, we may see quite a revolution and like new type of leaders emerging, because they will need a new skill set. They will need to have this AI skill set. Probably large companies will have to have own red teams, like basically having like hackers in residence, like people who can rigorously test and I think that's something which actually may happen. I think the security function can quite evolve.
Right. So essentially the cost of, I'm speaking from the place of a CEO, the cost of security is something that whatever savings you were making and getting an LLM system into your organization, take those savings and put it in security, because you're gonna need to.
I think that actually just may require to get a new type of the security team. And this is just gonna be very different, because if you think about the software like industry here in the United States, I mean, I can speak most about the California. Let me make a wild guess, not supported by the numbers. Probably over 50% of people in like machine learning, or I think they may be immigrants. Just a little bit wild, but that's just a hypothesis, right? And
that's not unfair.
That's not unfair. And we know that prompt engineering usually may require knowledge of the language. So what we can see is that the skill set which is needed to actually detect weaknesses is very, very specific. It requires some technical knowledge. It requires knowledge of the language. And we probably do not have many of such people, right?
Yeah. It's once you have a boundary with language, it becomes even rarer in a rare space. Absolutely.
So that's because like English is a new programming language in a sense, right? So you need to understand like how the models are trained, how they work, read the recent papers, know the math. Also, you need to be quite proficient in English, and I think that's unique type of the combination may also increase the compensation and the whole package for those specialized security workers in security space for LLMs.
Okay, well that's a new industry that you've birthed in the last hour. So thank you very much for that, Alex Mashrabov. Thank you for being on the program. It was really great talking to you. Thanks for sort of these blue ocean questions that I gave you. I appreciate you tolerating them and giving me some really good answers. I really enjoyed the conversation. If people wanted to find you and to talk to you and reach out, get more of your ideas and see what you're up to, how would they be able to do that?
I think my email is quite open. It's mashrabov@gmail.com. I am now at early stage of ideating my next startup. So very open to talk to different folks. Again, the salespeople, the distribution never goes away, and AI is likely not going to just replace all the solutions and all the people.
So sounds good. Thank you so much for being on the program, and hopefully you come back soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.